Well, hello everyone and welcome back to Perth South Model Railway. You'll see from the title of the video it's called Track Laying Complete, and what I'll do just now is show you the various final stages of track laying that I've done in the past few weeks, but I'll also show you some changes I decided to make to the plan. So let's look back to the original plan of the layout for the upper level of this layout. So this is pretty well where we had got to at the time of the last videos. We had all the main lines complete with the connections down to the low-level hidden sidings. The loco depot was complete along with the turntable. And the next stages of the original plan were to build the goods yard and also the mineral yard, the coals and mineral yard. Now, the exact layout of this has changed slightly, and I may not include the loading bank and cattle dock exactly as it's shown here, but all the tracks that you see in these two areas are now complete. I should say that in reality, the area where I have my goods yard and mineral yard, it was in reality a wagon repair depot, and actually that would have made quite an interesting prototype to model. But I decided, as this was my first layout for many years, I really wanted a goods yard on the layout where I could shunt wagons. So rule number one applies, and that's what I've got. However, there was a couple of other things that latterly I'd thought about trying to include. One of the things is that opposite the loco depot in the 1960s, there was always a line of scrap locos in the sidings on the upside opposite the depot. Now, this particular siding here, I need to have that free. That's a goods reception line and also an important head shunt for the goods yard. So if I zoom in a little bit in this area, I decided to add an additional siding coming off the final siding of the mineral yard. Now, the intention initially was that this would just be a more of a scenic item that I would eventually have old scrap locomotives sitting on. But I decided to actually connect it all up, make the points operational, because it's always handy to have another siding to store stock on. The other area that I'd put some additional thought into was on the downside between the signal box and the main lines. In the 1960s, there was actually a number of carriage sidings on the outside of the station wall here, and there was also, importantly, the slow freight lines which bypassed the station. Now, in the original plan, I gave a kind of token inclusion of a slow freight line by including this single down slow line here. But I decided that it would really be wrong not to show some track in this area. And I also had a spare arch in the St Leonard's Bridge to use. So I decided to include additional lines coming off the down slow, splitting up into a down and up slow, disappearing behind the station wall, and terminating just a short distance along behind the wall. Again, it's in some ways it's a scenic feature, but I did decide to make these separate blocks. I had some spare contact indicators that I hadn't used, so I decided to make use of these and create another couple of blocks so that I can run trains in and out of these lines automatically, albeit they can't get very far, but it is an interesting additional operating facility. In reality, these lines, as well as bypassing the station, they gave a connection into Perth Central Yard, which was the old North British and eventually the LNER yard, and it also connected into the large Dewars bonded warehouse facility that was in Glasgow Road. So this is our general goods yard. We've got 6 sidings, and these link into the main freight reception departure lines. On the far side, with the standard 5, we have the new down and up slow lines that are come out from behind the station and through the final arch in St Leonard's Bridge. This is our coals and mineral yard, more or less where the wagon repair depot should be in the prototype. And finally, this is the additional scrap storage line that I've added. And so 113 sets of points later, all the track laying in Perth South is now complete for the moment. My early Christmas present this year was to get a new computer to control the layout from, and as part of that I got a twin monitor card installed, which has allowed me to put up these screens. I have had to be quite careful about how I've fixed these to the ceiling. They are fastened via an 18mm piece of plywood through to the rafters, because I don't want any risk of these falling down onto the layout. Now I know a lot of you don't particularly like having flat screens to control your layout from. A lot of people like the feel of switches or levers, and even a very sophisticated layout like McKinley Railway, which is one of the ones I got my inspiration from to do this layout. Even they like their local hard switchboards to control the station areas from. But anyway, for me it was a no-brainer. I've got quite a sophisticated program called Train Controller, but there are loads of other programs out there that allow you to control your points, and many like this one allow you to set up routes quite easily. This uses a system of entrance and exit buttons just like a real signal box, and allows you to, for instance, with 4 clicks I can set a route from the station to the loco depot here, and it sets up the points through the maze of track work that I have between the station and the loco depot. This is one of the main screens for Train Controller. It also tracks the trains round the layout and tracks not just when the blocks are occupied, but the various points and routes in between. The next important screen in Train Controller is the engines and trains screen, and this lists all the engines and trains in the layout. And for instance, to take a loco from the depot and put it onto a train in the station, you simply drag and drop the loco from this list and attach it to one of the trains. And I use for the trains that are shown in the diagram, I use the 4-digit train reporting numbers that Rail Railways use. And for instance, if you look at 1 Mike 01 over here, you can see it shows a loco attached to it, and by clicking on that I can see which loco it is. The next important screen is the virtual dispatcher, and this is how all the schedules are controlled. This view changes depending on which schedule is highlighted, and each of these schedules, some of them are general for any train, but many of them are train specific, so that when I call up a particular schedule, then it's a particular train that will run on that path. The remaining windows are kind of optional in a way. The big clock is the system clock. You can set that to any time. It runs the timetable, which is at the bottom, and again, you can run the timetable or you don't need to. And then there's a series of on-screen throttles You can use these. You can call up any number of these throttles and change them from one loco to another. But I must confess, having said I like the glass screens, I do tend to use the hard Digitrax throttles for my local shunting and moving engines around. Now, those of you who have been following the channel from the beginning will know that I've used the DCC Concepts Powerbase on the gradients up from the low level, because I was concerned that the particularly steam locomotives wouldn't have enough grunt to be able to get up the hill. Now, in actual fact, most of the steam locomotives do manage to climb up the hill, and I haven't actually installed magnets in any of my locomotives, but there are some that struggle a bit. So I did get around to installing a few magnets in locomotives. But there's a problem. Again, from previous videos, you may know that I've installed these Railcrew Uncouplers. Now, these are great because you can switch them on and off. It means that you don't have couplings inadvertently coming apart, going over them. But the problem is they have a permanent magnet inside which gets rotated through 90 degrees. So in one position they're on and they will uncouple vehicles. When you switch them off, then the magnet swings through 90 degrees and it doesn't uncouple vehicles. However, it's still there. And the problem is this. The problem is that if we fit a loco with magnets for the DCC Concepts Powerbase and run it over one of the Railcrew uncoupling magnets, this happens. The loco just gets stuck. The two magnets attract each other, they're too powerful, and it just captures the locomotive and doesn't let it go past. So the two systems are basically incompatible. You either make use of the DCC Concepts Powerbase, which I've got fairly extensively on my gradients, or you make use of the Railcrew Uncouplers, but you can't use both. So currently my thinking is that I've managed to operate the layout without magnets in the locomotives for the DCC Concepts Powerbase so far. And I do rather like the ability, particularly in the station area, to couple and uncouple locomotives remotely. It does add something to the operation of the layout. So my thinking is at the moment that despite having installed Powerbase and all the gradients, I'll basically not make any use of it and stick with using the Railcrew Uncouplers. Now, for the locomotives that do struggle on the hills, I'm going to look at weighing them up, putting more weight into them, either lead. I've got a few things to try, including this liquid gravity, which is quite a heavy material that you can glue into your locomotives. So that's something for the future, I think, to look at. And I know it's difficult with steam locomotives finding space and places to add weight to. So what next for Perth South? Well, although I've said that all track laying is complete, there are a couple of areas of track work I'd still like to deal with. Between platforms 1 and 2, there's a central Dundee siding, and that had double acting catch points at either end. So I'd like to put in some kind of representation, non-working of course, of these catch points. The other thing that these tracks had, because of the curvature, they all had check rails on the inside of the curve to help steam locomotives in particular negotiate the tight curve. So I'm going to have a look at installing check rails on part or all of these curves. I am having a problem on one of the curves on the low level part of the layout where I'm having derailments with certain pony wheels and steam locomotives, and I think it's to do with the alignment of an insulated joint. Pico insulated rail joiners are not very good at holding the alignments and curves if they're slightly tighter. So I'm going to have a look at that, possibly replace a section of flexi track with set track. Unfortunately, it means lifting off some of the boards in the loco depot area, but that's one of the advantages of the approach I've taken with removable top boards. So hopefully that should be a fairly straightforward exercise. After that, well, all the track's to be ballasted. I think I might do some more testing of the track before I do that, although I'll be starting some trial sections of ballasting to get the colour and consistency of the ballast correct. Having said that, I'm a bit wary of having a lot of damp air in the loft at this time of year, so I suspect that the majority of the ballasting will be left until next spring, when hopefully we get some warmer weather. But a couple of things I do want to go on with is to install the signalling in the layout, because again that's tied into the computer system. Train controller will drive the signals to ensure that the correct aspect is shown for whichever route is chosen, and also to finish installing the remaining Railcrew Uncouplers. I've got a number to add in and around the goods yard, so I'd like to get them in, get all the kind of heavy wiring done over the coming weeks before ballasting and getting on with the scenery. And apologies to all of you who like to see examples of scenery going in, but this is a long-term project, and I've always said from the beginning that I want to make sure that the layout works properly before I move on and install all the scenic treatments. Anyway, having said that, let's finish with a running session with our new computer and twin screens. We'll give Train Controller a run for its money, set all the trains off and let Train Controller sort them out. So there might be a bit of stopping and starting as trains allow each other to pass, but let's see what happens. I hope you enjoy it in the meantime, and have a great Christmas, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.